"Thanks, Mom, for nothing." That's what Gayle King said, on air, live during CBS Mornings, not in a tweet somebody deleted later, not in some anonymous industry gossip column. On live national television, reacting to something Hayden Panettiere's own mother had just said days after her daughter died. I keep coming back to that clip because I think it tells you something about where this story actually is right now. And it's not where most of the headlines are pointing you. Everyone's talking about the DEA, and we should talk about the DEA. I'll get there. But there's a family fracture happening in public, in real time, around a woman who can't speak for herself anymore, and I don't think enough people are sitting with what that actually looks like. Let me back up and give you the order of things, because the order matters here. Sunday, August 16th. Hayden Panettiere is found unresponsive in an apartment in Greenville, South Carolina. Cardiac arrest, according to the dispatch audio. Paramedics work on her. It doesn't work. She's pronounced dead at 2:32 in the afternoon. She was 36. Her father, Skip Panettiere, he's a retired FDNY captain, actually, not that it gets mentioned much anymore, put out a statement almost immediately. Called her an incredible light, a force of nature, standard, warm, grieving father language. Nothing controversial in it at all. Her mother's statement was different. Lesley Vogel, she and Hayden had been estranged for a while, and that's not a secret. Hayden had actually written about the complicated parts of that relationship in her own memoir earlier this year. Lesley put out something that acknowledged the tragedy, sure, but then pivoted fairly quickly into talking about how Hollywood had corrupted her daughter, how the industry had led her down the road that ended in Greenville. People noticed the tone, people reacted, and that's what Gayle King was responding to on air. A mother's public statement about her daughter's death that a lot of viewers felt sounded less like grief and more like something else entirely. I'm not going to sit here and tell you what was in Lesley Vogel's heart when she wrote that. I can't know that. Nobody watching a clip on television can know that. But I can tell you what she said next, because she kept talking. And what she said next is, I think, the actual center of gravity in this story right now. She told Entertainment Tonight, a few days after the initial statement, that she and Hayden had been estranged. But she wanted to be clear, she said, that it wasn't for lack of care or love. It was, in her words, due to the involvement of a toxic individual who she believes led to her daughter's death. A toxic individual who she believes led to her daughter's death. She didn't need to name him. Everybody following this story already knew exactly who she meant. Brian Hickerson. Now, I want to stop right here because this is exactly the point where a lot of channels covering this case go somewhere I'm not willing to go. A grieving, estranged mother saying she believes someone led to her daughter's death is not the same thing as evidence that he did. It's not a police finding. It's not a coroner's ruling. It's not a charge. It's a mother's public statement, made in pain, made in public, and it deserves to be reported as exactly that, a mother's belief, not repackaged as an established fact. Because here's what actually is established, as of right now. Brian Hickerson has not been charged with anything related to Hayden's death. The Greenville Police Department has stated, on the record, that there were no signs of foul play during their initial response and investigation. His attorney, a woman named Sloan Ellis, released a short statement acknowledging the investigation is ongoing and asking, respectfully, that it be allowed to proceed. That's it. That's the entirety of the official record on him, right now, today. So, You've got two completely different stories sitting on top of each other. A mother, publicly, essentially pointing a finger, and a police department saying, "So far, we don't see foul play here." Both of those things exist at the same time, and I think being honest with you means showing you both, instead of picking whichever one makes for a punchier video. Let's talk about who Brian Hickerson actually is in relation to Hayden, though, because his history isn't nothing, and pretending otherwise would be its own kind of dishonesty. They'd been together, on and off, for years. In 2020, he was convicted of felony domestic abuse against her. He served jail time for it, 33 days. A 5-year restraining order followed in 2021. Both of them, at different points, spoke publicly about that relationship being an abusive one. He's talked about it with what sounds like genuine remorse in past interviews. That's the history. It's documented. It's not a rumor somebody's spreading online. It's a criminal record. And he was there, in the apartment, him and his brother, Zach, when Hayden died. I think that combination, a documented history of domestic violence, plus being present at the moment of death, plus a mother publicly calling him a toxic individual who led to it, that combination is exactly why this story has the emotional charge it does. It would be strange if people weren't asking questions, but asking questions isn't the same as answering them. And right now, none of us have the answers. Not me, not you, not, as far as the public record shows, the Greenville Police Department either. Not fully, not yet. Here's what we do know happened on the medical side, because this part is documented, not speculative. An autopsy was performed the day after she died. The coroner's office said it found no visible injuries, no trauma that would explain her death. Which, if you're looking for a simple, obvious answer, that already rules one out. This wasn't a physical assault that left marks. Whatever happened to Hayden Panettiere happened in a way that an external examination alone couldn't explain. Which is exactly why toxicology matters so much here. And why, 4 days after her death, news broke, first through TMZ, then confirmed by NBC, ABC, and the New York Times, that the DEA had assigned multiple agents to this case. I'm not going to walk you through the entire Matthew Perry precedent again in detail. If you've followed any coverage of this at all over the last few days, you already know the shape of it. DEA gets involved in a celebrity death. They trace where drugs came from, and in Perry's case, that tracing led to actual federal convictions. Multiple people went to prison. That's the framework everyone's using to understand what DEA involvement here might mean. But there's a detail that I think got buried under all the Matthew Perry comparisons, and it's actually the most concrete piece of confirmation we have that this isn't just reporters connecting dots on their own. Lesley Vogel, the mother, told NBC News directly that a detective informed her personally that a narcotics investigator had been brought onto the case. Her exact words, more or less. It leads me to believe they have questions. That's not a leaked source. That's not an anonymous tip passed to a reporter. That's the victim's own mother saying on the record that law enforcement told her, specifically, that a narcotics specialist is now involved. So when the DEA news broke publicly a day or two later, it wasn't really a surprise to anyone paying close attention. Her own mother had already confirmed the direction this was heading. I want to sit with something for a second, because I think it's easy to fly past it when you're just listing facts one after another. Somewhere in Greenville, South Carolina, there is a bag of medication. The police report, which has been released publicly, mentions that Brian Hickerson showed officers a bag of medication that Hayden had been taking. It doesn't say what was in it. It doesn't say whether any of it is connected to how she died. It just says it existed and that officers were shown it. A bag of pills. In an apartment where a documented recovering addict, someone who had spent years publicly fighting to stay sober, someone who had just published a memoir specifically about that fight, was staying with a man who has a documented history of abusing her. I don't know what's in that bag. I don't know if it matters at all to how she died, but I understand why a narcotics investigator wanted to know. There's something else here that I think deserves real weight, and it's not about Hickerson at all. It's about what this family had already survived before any of this happened. In February of 2023, Hayden's younger brother, Jansen, also an actor, 28 years old, was found dead in his apartment in Nyack, New York. A friend found him, performed CPR. It didn't work. The medical examiner later determined the cause was cardiomegaly, an enlarged heart, combined with aortic valve complications. Natural causes, sudden, no warning. Hayden talked later about how much that loss broke something in her. She described becoming agoraphobic afterward, barely leaving the house, gaining weight she felt trapped in. She said it was her job to protect her only sibling, and she couldn't. So when she sat down to write This Is Me, A Reckoning, the memoir that came out this past May, she wasn't just writing about the industry or the addiction or what happened to her as a teenager. She was writing, in part, as someone who had already buried her little brother 18 months earlier, as someone who had already lived through the specific, singular horror of getting a phone call that a sibling is gone. And 3 months after that book came out, her own family, her own mother, was standing in front of cameras in the immediate aftermath of losing her too, publicly assigning blame in one direction, while the actual investigation was still trying to figure out the facts. I don't think there's anything clean about this story. I don't think there's a version of it where everyone involved comes out looking good, or where the truth arrives quickly and neatly. I think what's actually happening here is a family that had already been shattered once, getting shattered again in public, with television cameras capturing every uncomfortable statement along the way. Let me tell you where things stand today, because that's really the only responsible way to end something like this. No cause of death has been officially determined. Toxicology results are still pending. Those typically take weeks, sometimes longer, and there's been no indication they're back yet. The autopsy found no trauma. The DEA has multiple agents assigned, working alongside the Greenville Police Department and the coroner's office, looking specifically at whether any medication involved was obtained or distributed illegally. Brian Hickerson has not been charged with anything connected to her death. He has not been named a suspect by police. His attorney has asked publicly that the investigation be allowed to run its course before anyone draws conclusions. Her mother has publicly called him, in her words, a toxic individual she believes led to her daughter's death. That's a real statement, made by a real, grieving, estranged parent, and I've reported it to you exactly as she said it. But it is her belief, not a legal finding, and I think you deserve to hear that distinction stated plainly instead of blurred for effect. Her body has been released to her family. They're working on funeral arrangements now, and somewhere in all of this, past the DEA, past the mother's statements, past the old restraining order and the bag of medication and the narcotics investigator, there's just a 36-year-old woman who spent the last several months of her life trying to be honest about everything that had happened to her, who wrote a book she was scared to publish because of exactly the kind of scrutiny and fallout that's playing out right now, who lost her brother less than 2 years before losing her own life, who, by every account of people who actually knew her, was trying. I don't have a tidy way to close this out, and I don't think I should pretend to. This is still moving. The toxicology isn't back. The DEA's specific findings, whatever they turn out to be, haven't been made public. And a family that's already grieving one impossible loss is now grieving another in front of everyone, without the privacy most people get to have when something like this happens to them. If you want the actual updates, when they're actually confirmed, not the speculation, not whatever gets repeated fastest online, just what investigators and credentialed reporters have verified. That's what this channel is here for. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and we'll